And of course, I'm going to record this video, and these contracts are going to like totally change January 1st for some reason. But today, I really wanted to go over the seller, basically the seller agreement to pay the buyer broker agreement, but it's a little confusing. So when you are in the residential purchase agreement, there's the buyer representation and broker compensation agreement. This is in zip forms for California, for anyone watching the recording. You're going to scroll down. It's probably going to have random names on here. I don't know who that is. We scroll down all the way to 3G. So in the main body of the purchase, right, you have the main key stuff that you're offering. And right down here, you have credits, additional financing terms, and then the SPBB, which is what people keep saying and it drives me crazy, but seller agreement to pay the obligations of buyer to compensate buyer's broker. So when you check this box, this is what you want to check, and you always will make sure. So whenever someone sends me an offer to review, which I love reviewing, I can do it very quickly versus helping someone, teaching them everything at 7 o'clock at night when they're trying to put together an offer last minute for someone. I do not mind you sending me an offer at 7 o'clock at night. It's super easy for me to take a few screenshots and mark it with red and text it back to you of, you know, what to edit and what to fix. I can do it super fast. But make sure you always check that box. It automatically saves, but just make sure you save. And then you're going to go back. Oh, I should have put, I hated this new setting that they have. And then it's always going to be at the bottom in the very last document that uploads. So seller payment for buyer's broker compensation. I always click start new workspace. Someone else can teach me at some point. It naturally says the following terms and conditions are hereby incorporated in and made a part of the purchase agreement. So you don't need to check other, especially for this document. And then you're going to put the date that you prepared that agreement, right? So whatever date is not the date that they signed, the date that you prepared it. Obviously, it's not going to buyer's brokers. This is the brokerage, should be here. This is the well, this would be the seller, but you would have this name blank, right? Because you don't know the seller. You would have the seller's brokerage here, though. So this line right here would be blank, and this would be your buyer. So it's important to read, you know, seller payment to buyer's broker. In the amount subject to paragraph 1B below, seller agrees to pay buyer's broker. This is where you put percentage of the purchase price, and if any, if you wanted to put an extra dollar amount for some reason, you would put that. Or if checked, you would just put a specific dollar amount. Why would you put a specific dollar amount? If you're okay with certain commission amounts, so it's not a percentage, and you don't want to do the math, like you just say, hey, I want to make $5,000 off this deal, and instead of doing 2% or 1.875, I'm just going to put the dollar amount. You'll tend to see this more with mobile home listings where you're just going to put a dollar amount. I personally do not believe anyone should be asking or bringing up to the listing agent when they call, hey, is your seller willing to pay a buyer's agent commission? I have agents calling me, even when I'm doing the loans, where they call me crying, maybe not crying, but pretty much crying. This agent is so rude. They said the seller's not willing to pay me a commission, and I don't know if I want to go and show my client the house if they're not willing to pay me a commission. I said, how did that even come up? Isn't the house vacant? And they say, oh, you know, I just asked them, hey, they said, I just asked them, hey, is your client, like, I would like to show this house. Is your client willing to pay me a commission? Your seller. Don't ask, just submit the offer, right? The thing is yes, is there a possibility that you might waste your time? Maybe, but here's my thing is you're going to have more situations where you're going to submit the offer asking for compensation, and they're going to come back and say, no, we're not willing to pay it. And you're going to say, fine, then we're going to go look for something else. We officially pull our offer and it is no longer valid. They're going to come back to you after a week or so, and they're going to say, hey, is your client still interested? We're about to do a $10,000 price drop, and we're realizing that that's less that's more than the commission we would have paid you. Is your buyer still interested? That is going to happen, because I'm seeing so often that houses that have been on the market for a long time, the seller is unwilling to pay a buyer's agent commission. The listing agent is very upfront about it, which does a disservice to the seller. So I would, don't ask them. When you call to submit the offer, to say, is there anything that the seller is looking for? Do you have escrow pre-opened? Do they want a quick close of escrow? Do they want a long close of escrow? Do they need a rent back? What's the situation going on? Anything that they may need to disclose up front that you think I should be aware of? Okay, great. I am not bringing up this commission. I'm not asking them, unless if you feel that there's a valid reason to bring this up, like saying, hey, I'm going to ask for 2.5. The only reason I might bring up, hey, I'm going to be asking for a certain commission, is because I'm going to justify it to them over the phone. Hey, I'm going to be asking for 2.5% commission. I talked my client into coming to your list price because I don't think there's any value in them asking for 5,000 less or 10,000 less, because it really does not affect their monthly payment, and they would rather get their offer accepted. I want you to know that I'm going to work to keep the deal together. I'm not going to screw over my client, but I am big in educating them. That's why they're working with my preferred lender, because we are a team and we do really well together, and we make sure deals close on time in a timely manner. I answer my phone, so you can call me if you have questions. I will tell you if any issues come up. But that's why I'm worth 2.5%. And this is coming from your seller's equity. Once again, just want to remind you that instead of them offering 10,000 less, I'd rather just ask for that credit because it's less than that or whatever it might be. Then when the agent says, oh, my seller's only willing to pay you 2%. Okay, well, I'm still going to submit an offer for 2.5. Just let me know what they think. And if they say, well, I'm telling you they're only going to pay 2.5. Okay, then we'll just say, okay, then you'll have to send a counter offer. Because then what I'm going to do is I'm going to send a counter offer asking for a credit in the amount of 0.5%. So this is happening a lot where someone, this happened to Damaris. So I shared this yesterday. The agent said, hey, my seller is aware of the lawsuits happening recently, and they're very strict that they just they only are willing to pay you 1%. I'm willing to pay you 0.5% from my commission. So at least you're getting 1.5. Just put that in the offer. Okay. Then she asked, well, my client wants to offer 2,000 less. Do you think that would be acceptable with your seller? Now, the person's getting a loan. So 2,000 less is maybe like, I don't know, $10 a month, $20 a month, something like that. That 2,000 less was the difference, was more than the half. That person said, yes, we would accept your offer 2,000 less than our list price. That 2,000 less was more than the 0.5% to round up from 1.5 to 2%, because she wanted to get paid 2%. So I told her, instead of offering 2,000 less, just ask for a $2,000 credit. That way your client doesn't have to come out of pocket that other 0.5%, because you want 2% as your commission, and like you're okay with that. There you go. So sometimes you just need to, and as silly as it is, sometimes you just have to play the game a little bit, right? So whatever the commission amount is, you can put it there, you can put it here. Okay, this is the part where I think our contracts are going to change a little bit. As of right now, if you're watching the recording, we're on December 5th. You do not have to present the you do not have to present the buyer. Nothing in our contracts say that I, who am representing a buyer, have to give my buyer broker compensation agreement to the seller and the listing agent. I do not, that's private. I do not have to provide it to them. However, when you read this, it does say, so seller shall only be obligated to pay buyer's broker the lesser of the amount specified in paragraph 1A, right here, or the amount buyer is obligated to pay, lesser amount that the buyer, sorry, still getting over COVID. Seller shall only be obligated to pay buyer's broker the lesser of the amount buyer is obligated to pay buyer's broker pursuant to their buyer representation agreement, and if applicable, less any amount that others have agreed to pay buyer's broker. If there is no buyer representation agreement, then seller has no obligation to pay buyer's broker. Reading that, why would that basically says, hey, I do not, if you put 2.5%, but your buyer broker agreement is 2%, I do not have to pay you 2.5%. Why would I not be then obligated to review your buyer broker agreement? This also says if there's no buyer representation agreement in place, it doesn't say a timeline. So let's be very clear, because I get this question a lot from people in other brokerages who apparently can't call their broker, which I don't understand, but whatever. They said, hey, what if I have them sign the buyer broker agreement, or I changed it after I showed the property? It does not state anything about the buyer representation agreement that was signed prior to viewing the property. So if I have my client sign a buyer representation agreement, I get that that's what the law is, but if I have them sign a new one, let's say, after we saw the property, it's fine. It doesn't say anything about that. So if I have them sign it with the offer, totally fine. But what this does say, if there is no buyer representation agreement, then seller has no obligation to pay the buyer's broker. So even if they sign this, what's to stop them from, they don't have to pay you if you don't have that agreement. So that this is going to become an issue, and they're going to change the agreement that basically says you have to provide it. I mean, otherwise they'd have to change this. So at some point, it is going to be required that you're going to have to present your buyer broker agreement. So don't throw a fit now. It's going to change. Buyer representation regarding compensation. Buyer represents that as of the date signed by buyer below. Buyer has a signed representation agreement with buyer's broker. So once again, if you haven't signed a buyer representation agreement before showing the property, or you're having them sign a new one with the offer, it just needs to be signed at the same time as this. So buyer represents that as of the date signed by buyer below. Buyer has a signed representation agreement with buyer's broker, and the amount specified in paragraph 1A is no more than the amount buyer is obligated to pay buyer's broker pursuant to the buyer representation agreement, and if applicable, less any amount that others have agreed to pay buyer's broker. So your buyer broker agreement says 2.5%. You put on here 2%. Your buyer has to pay you the other 0.5%. You can obviously amend it, or you can obviously just decline. And when you're telling escrow, just say, hey, it's just 2%. I highly recommend just amending it so that your client feels that they trust you and you're sending documents, rather than just saying, hey, take my word, we're not going to do 2.5%. Don't get in that situation. So it just says, hey, the buyer is representing, hey, my buyer broker agreement says a certain amount, and so you are not paying more than this. So if you choose not to provide this to them, right, it just goes to show, like, hey, that they're agreeing. And I think a lot of people might be confused by that. And so just make sure that you're communicating well. And for any buyers, I guess, who are watching this video on YouTube, you need to understand that whatever amount they're putting in here needs to match, or if it's less than what is on your buyer broker agreement, then you are responsible to pay that difference according to these contracts. So just be aware of that. Delivery of buyer representation agreement. Buyer authorizes, oh, did they change this already? Of course they changed this when I'm doing this recording. Buyer authorizes buyer's broker and, if applicable, escrow holder upon request to deliver to seller or seller's broker a copy of portion. Okay, so they already changed it. Perfect. The first time they came out with this, they didn't have this on there. So you do have to now provide this. Third-party beneficiary. Seller acknowledges and agrees that buyer broker is a third-party beneficiary of this agreement. So this statement right here is going to become a lot longer, probably with a lot more disclosures. So hopefully that makes sense. Now, here's the strategy that I would have in submitting offers. One, yes, never ask them, are they willing to pay something? Because I would rather just submit the offer. Now, two, you need to understand that there's a couple other things at play. One is you have listing agents who sometimes sometimes have huge egos, and that will get in the way. And a lot of times they will speak for their seller. Like when I started the brokerage, I tell people all the time, I got advice from an attorney, and I also, our errors and emissions insurance company kind of had a brief talk, and they said, hey, do you work with more, people who have been in the industry for a while or newer agents? And actually they liked that we worked with newer real estate agents more than experienced, because statistically, the people who have been around for 5 years plus tend to get in more lawsuits. And what my attorney had told me is that they tend to be the ones who think that they are attorneys because of their experience in the industry. And they stop reading the contracts when there are adjustments, right? This was changed again in July 2024. And they stop reading these contracts, or they start to, the big one is they start to speak for their clients. So whenever you are in a situation where you can pick up that they are speaking for their clients, they say, my client's not going to, whatever it might be, my client's not going to fix that. My client, how do you know? You haven't talked to your client yet. So I'm not going to say that. I'm just going to stop answering their phone calls. I'm going to submit what we want to submit and say, let me know what your seller thinks. Hey, my seller's not going to accept this, this commission. They're only willing to pay this. Just say, okay, then we may be walking away, but just present it to your seller and let me know what they want to do. Either send me a counter or let me know what they want to, or reject it, but let me know what they want to do. So this is my thing too, that is really in play, is that there are a lot of people who are just not understanding the idea of what of netting something. So for instance, I had a client who reached out and she said, well, I really need to sell my property for this amount. And I said, okay, why that amount? Right? That's what I typically ask. That's not what a lot of real estate agents ask, especially newer real estate agents who have listings. Why do you want to sell it for this? Because I know that there's closing costs involved. So how does she know what the closing costs are? Because I haven't even talked about my commission. So she says, well, I really need to net this amount. And I go, okay, I think that is very doable to net that amount. I want you to keep in mind that when I'm running quotes, I think you're definitely going to net that amount, because even if you pay a buyer's agent this, she goes, I don't want to pay a buyer's agent. I'm tired of getting screwed over, something. I don't want to pay them. I said, well, she said, do you think that's doable? I said, no, I don't, because you're paying out of your equity, which you've just sat on this property, and our appreciation in our area is around 7%, sometimes a little, usually a little above that. That means in 1 year, you have more than enough equity, generally speaking, more than enough equity to cover my commission and an agent's commission and other closing costs. So that's not money out of your pocket. To ask a buyer, that's extra money out of their pocket. All of their closing costs are out of their pocket. Their down payments out of their pocket. To ask them to then pay another 2%, you're just really limiting your buyer pool, which really limits the overall price. Why don't we just factor it in the price? And so, long story short, we ended up finding out, she said, why don't you just take half of your 6% commission and give it to or a portion of that and give it to the other agent? I go, you're not understanding how it usually works. It usually works that way. Also, I don't really normally take 6% as a total commission. Normally I do 5.5%, 3% to me, 2.5% to the other side, because I think that keeps them incentivized. But here's what I like to say for my listings, and what, if I was representing a buyer, kind of how I would pitch it as well. Here's our list price. If you bring in a buyer, you can have 2.5%. You want to come with a $10,000 less offer, then we'll ask you to reduce your commission to 2%. Fine, right? It obviously, if we've been on the market for a while and this property is not selling, then I'm going to think, hey, Mr., Miss, whoever seller, we need to be aware that my next advice is to do a price drop, either in the amount of $5,000 or $10,000. So if we get any offers before then where they're asking for a big commission, just understand that I probably, my advice, if we don't take this, like, let's say your seller says, I'm only willing to pay 2%. This person's asking for 3% commission. I'm going to tell them, let's keep in mind, you and I were just talking about possibly doing a $10,000 price drop. That is more, once we do the $10,000 price drop, we're still going to have to anticipate that someone may ask for a commission, even if it's in 2%. That 1% is less than this big price drop we're about to do, right? It's the mathematics of it. People need to start focusing on the net. They need to keep in mind what I'm going to net is what's important. So put the listing agent in a position, because there's going to be some listing agents who are going to negotiate and get 4% as their total commission, and then I'm coming in here and saying, no, I want 2.5. No, we want 2.5, or we're walking. And these are things that I like to explain to my client as we're looking at houses. Hey, I do not expect you to pay my commission because this is my opinion. If you're willing to pay for it, great. Like if we get into a multiple offer situation, then we can talk about it, right? Where we need to figure out, hey, how do you not come out of pocket as much? Or if you're okay with it, what do we do? And there's things we can do as well. Like the lender could always do an interest rate bump, right? Essentially, you're kind of financing my commission. So there's things we can do to make it work. But you have to kind of understand that market. So one, yes, I would not go and ask anyone what they're willing to pay for a commission. I'd rather just submit the offer and then justify it later. I have seen recently where people have canceled because the seller was unwilling to pay the buyer's agent commission. So they declined their offer, and pulled it from the table and just said, hey, fine, then we're going to go find a house over here. So people need to keep that in mind, and they need to probably put that in writing in an email so that, you kind of put the listing agent in a position that if the seller's wondering who's to blame why the house isn't selling and they were talking for their seller, then they're going to get in trouble. So people need to be careful saying, hey, we're not willing to pay you a commission. If it's my listing and they say, hey, what's your seller willing to pay for a commission? Hey, just type up your offer and submit it and I'll present it. Well, what are they willing to pay? I can't, I haven't seen your offer. Are you going to be offering more? Are you going to be offering less? I want you to submit your offer. Are you going to be willing to answer the phone on the weekends? I don't know. I mean, just submit your offer. That's what I would do for my listings. And this is what Viviana did. She got multiple offers. They were asking for 2.5%. Both were less than the list price. She said, should I counter them at the list price? I said, counter them over. Counter them like 5,000 over. And because her seller didn't really want to pay a certain amount in commission, they were both asking 2.5, and say, hey, I was willing, here's your counter. It's 5,000 over the list price. I talked my seller out of asking you to reduce your commission because you offered less than our list price, but we do have multiple offers. So now we're over the list price. So if you do want to keep your 2.5% that you asked for, then I would agree to this. Otherwise, you can stick with offering less than the list price, but we're going to probably ask for you to reduce your commission. And that's going to be the next counter that goes out. Boom. She had someone that reduced their commission from 2.5% to 2% and accepted it at 5,000 over. So it's the power of negotiation and it's the leverage, right? So that's what you really have to get good at, is what leverage do I have? And I lose leverage if I just start asking the agent. Submit the offer so that the seller gets that excitement and they see the net sheet. It might even work to submit your offer with a net sheet. Just leave out the listing agent's commission and just say, hey, I'm having them split title and escrow fees. I'm having my buyer pay for their home warranty. I'm having them pay for the natural hazards disclosure as long as it's through American Home Shield, because it's $50 versus $100 or $180. I'm having them do a lot of other things. But here's a net sheet just to help, I would just submit it with the offer. But that way, let them see the net, because when people see the commission amount, that's all they're going to focus on. It's I don't like talking about interest rates to people unless they ask about it. On the loan side, I would rather just talk to them about monthly payment, because it's hard for them to equate in their head. I'm hearing 6%, that seems high, but when they see their monthly payment, they go, oh, that's within the goal that I want. That's totally fine. And you're telling me that if I could refinance later, then I can get a much lower payment. Okay, same thing with the commission amount. submit the offer. Like when you attach this, I would attach this at the bottom. So what I would do if I was all of you, if there's well, I guess there's not. There is a way that you can attach this at the bottom with the purchase agreement, but rather than a separate document. But otherwise, you would have to use like a PDF combiner, but I would essentially try to combine it so that it's at the very bottom of the California purchase agreement, at the bottom of all the disclosures. That way they see those upfront amounts first. Hopefully that makes sense to everyone who's online right now. Do you two have any questions? No? Awesome. I mean, the main thing is I would say, and anyone who watches the recording, is talk out the situations. Like I like to tell people, it's easy to practice and write these offers. But when you get your first offer, it's important to have someone available that you can call and say, hey, please review this with me. And I'm going to always say, please give me every detail of what you said in the conversation. It's why some of our younger agents, I try to tell them, stop saying the word like and cool and whatever other slang terms. Talk very professionally, because otherwise people will naturally look at you as someone they might be able to take advantage of. Same thing when you're setting up the showings, go on the MLS and look at the showing instructions before you ask them, may I show the property? If it says vacant, go show in all caps, do not text them, may I show your property? Because you're just starting off the relationship bad. And there are agents that will tell, like I've told my clients, hey, if I've worked with the agent before, or or as we start to work with them, from showing the property to, how they call me, I will let you know if they seem like they're good to work with, or if I just don't really know. And I'll sit down with you and say, hey, look, this person was super rude. Here, they didn't call me. I can't get a hold of them. I can't get a hold of their loan officer. I just really think that we can use them to leverage others to get better offers, but this is going to be someone that I'd put on our naughty list, and we do not really want to work with them, because honestly, if I can't communicate with them, it's going to make the transaction a nightmare. So for you need to be aware of that when you're submitting offers, that anything that can put you above helps, right? It helps you get a bigger commission. Your email doesn't look professional. You don't type up something, right? Maybe type up a brief summary, whatever it might be. Anything you can do to help yourself get that commission, because we are in sales, the better. And we've seen agents who say, no, I'm worth 2.5%. So Damaris, who I gave as an example, she said, no, I'm worth 2.5% because I'm going to answer the phone. I work really hard and I'm available and I'm going to get this deal closed. This is my investor client. He wants this house and we're going to get the deal closed. So I'm worth 2.5%. Guess what the listing agent told our loan officer? He said, man, actually, she was really good at negotiating for someone who is that new. Like, it was very easy for me to go and present her 2.5% to the seller because she did that. So good for her. Stand up for yourself, because maybe the listing agent doesn't have enough confidence to tell that to the seller. But when you exude that to them, you're basically teaching them how they can present it to the seller. Does that make sense? I'm going to tell them why I'm worth a certain amount, because I think that they're going to copy the exact verbiage to the seller, and it's going to help my case. I don't know how they're going to sell my commission to the seller. They may just say, hey, they're asking for 2.5%. The seller's going to say, oh, that seems high. Why don't we counter at 2? I heard we can counter at 2. Instead, they're going to say, hey, they said that they're worth 2.5. They really stuck with that. They said that they'll answer the phone. They'll work with me. They'll guarantee, right? That's what I want them to say to their seller. That's what I would say to my seller too. So does that make sense to all of you?